Good evening and welcome to the Journey Home. My name is Marcus Grodi, your host for this program. And this is Open Line First Monday, I guess Open Line First Week, since I know some of you are watching in different time zones in Europe. This isn't Monday anymore where you're at, but we've always chose to focus on this first episode to make it more open to your phone calls and emails. So right away I'm going to give you the phone number. It's 1-800-221-9460, or you can send us an email at journeyhome@ewtn.com. On this episode of the program, I invite back to the Journey Home program either someone that I've had before who's already told you their journey, or sometimes a lifelong Catholic who talks about their own journey of faith. And in this case, our guest tonight, who's also been on the Journey Home twice, I think, right?
Yes, believe it or not, right.
In my seat and your seat.
That's right.
But Doug is here, lifelong Catholic, but I wanted Doug to come back to emphasize a little bit about his work as Vice President of Programming and Production for EWTN, and the videos, the home videos.
Right, home video.
Home video.
Radio.
And radio, and is catalog under you too?
No.
Oh, okay, all right. No. But your bookmark program, segues into the book.
Well, certainly, there's a connection there because we make it available through Religious Catalog. But
all right. Well, I wanted you on the program because you could, welcome to
Journey
Home.
I get to shake everybody's hand on my shoulder. I wanted to shake your hand too.
And I've had the pleasure of being on your program.
Right, with your fine book.
My book, thank you. I appreciated that little opportunity to let people know about the book.
Well, I thought that book was very successful in accomplishing what you wanted it to accomplish, which was something that you could give to someone who wasn't Catholic, and in reading the book, would gently be led down the series of appropriate questions to where Catholicism is the ultimate truth.
Yeah, and it's been very well received, but sometimes I'm a little disappointed when I don't see it in Catholic bookstores or something, but then, the way that the cover and everything was designed was not necessarily to be on the book right up in front of the Catholic bookstore. Right. It was to be a stealth book that people would look at and think, is this a mystery? Is this a murder mystery? And hopefully they'll get into the plot and enjoy the plot, and in the process learn more about the Catholic Church. I mean, so that kind of connects with the way also I see a bit of our programming with EWTN. I want to talk about that. Some of our programming is Catholicism right there, but some of it is we're trying to reach those that aren't in the church. But before we get there,
okay,
you told your journey on the program a couple years ago. Well, why don't you give us a 5-minute summary?
The short game version.
Yeah. Why are you still Catholic?
Why am I still Catholic?
Not doing that from a sarcastic.
I'm still Catholic because if you believe in God and believe in our Lord Jesus Christ, there's no place else to be. Because if you're not Catholic, I really believe, certainly having been Catholic, I could understand someone who's never been Catholic maybe finding degrees of the truth elsewhere and not seeing that they need to make that leap. But I think having been given the gift and spending the time, at least having the opportunity and your eyes kind of opened and the grace to appreciate it, it really does come down in my mind to, either Catholicism is right or nothing's right. You know what I mean? Kind of a thing. It's either the church is correct and it's on the mark with the way things are, and if the Catholic Church is wrong, then every other Christian church is wrong. Yeah. So there's really no option. It's very simple for me, I guess. It's not something I'd even think about because it's either is or it isn't, and I believe it is, and so that makes it easy for me.
Of course, the reason I asked it that way was because you and I both know that there are an awful lot of probably classmates of yours brought up in the same church, and they're gone. They've gone elsewhere, and yet you stayed tight. But was there a time when you wandered at all a bit and had to?
Sure, as we talked before, I guess it's one of those things where I always describe it as kind of the drift. It wasn't something that happened. I grew up in late 60s, early 70s. We did a lot of string paintings and collages and things. My joke now is if we just held on to those collages and string paintings, we'd know all about our faith. But we spent a lot of time relating.
That's a good idea, a 30-year after retreat,
right.
To reflect
we bring back our own collage paintings and compare.
Yeah, macrames.
How many ways you can spell the word love and all those kind of things. They were good in relating, but it didn't necessarily give you any meat and potatoes of the faith. And so I think what happened with there was not a conscious effort to ever say, I don't believe this anymore, I'm walking away from it. There was just kind of this natural drift that you went to Mass if you felt like it. You didn't have to go to Mass, It was good if you went, but you didn't have to. And, the church is evolving and changing and being more open. And I always remember, in fact, being in Catholic school and going to the local parish and hearing what the CCD kids thought, and thought, oh, they're behind the curve here. They're not up to speed on the new evangelization, where we're going with having retreats and things like that, where things got. So as I got into business, etc., I married a wonderful Catholic girl, who's my wife. I was very lucky to somehow get her corralled in high school, and I held on for dear life, and I still have. But, you know, even with that, and I worked in television and radio, and I've worked on some projects and channels that people would recognize, and some of the programming was risque, to say the least. But, you know, the weird thing that I guess I had been dumbed down like the boiling frog, where it just never really struck me that there was anything wrong, because culturally these were things that we needed to accept, we needed to be more open, they were good for people, because it would be better for them to get these aspects of their lives out in the light of day than have it be constrained.
So you didn't just compartmentalize as some do, you know, this is my job, this is my faith. You actually had seen those kind of meld together, and this is just the...
It just seemed to be that was the open way of, and everything was kind of okay. It was a very non-judgmental kind of thing, where, you know, I may not personally think that's a wonderful thing, but, you know, that might be good for somebody else, and if that's good for them, well, I guess that's okay. But again, this whole idea of just kind of drifting along, and you know, nothing saying I'm walking away from this, but just you know, kind of going your own way. The only thing I can remember was abortion. You know, certainly, you know, I was in high school when Roe v. Wade was decided, and I was in a Catholic high school, and I think probably half the people there thought at the time that that was a good decision, because everybody had bought into the idea, you know, you don't want any unwanted children, what about the poor girl, you know, all of these things that we were obviously so wrong about, but it was easy to believe and take the kind of pro-choice position of the, well, I'm personally opposed, I would never have one, I wouldn't want my wife to have one, but I don't want to stop somebody else from having one.
You're not going to drop your own baggage on somebody else.
Right, and I remember being in Mass once and hearing priests actually talk against abortion, believe it or not, and thinking, well, you know, if the church better lighten up on this, or we're not going to send them money anymore. And I think about myself today and think, how could I ever think like that? But I did. You know, so obviously
I. So you were
I
surprised back to the church when you had your return to faith? Was it a surprise for you? Or?
Yeah, well, again, I think what happened to me, and I talked a little bit about marriage encounter. You know, that was the thing. Friends of ours who we had met, a friend of mine from high school, we had met her and her husband a couple of years later. And he was going to break the bank in Monte Carlo, and then I met him a couple of years later, and he was dancing on the deck with his wife celebrating his anniversary, and all these people were standing around saying the Our Father, and I said, something changed here. And at the same time, I had been lucky enough to work in media and get to know some fairly famous people, you know, working with them, and in sports. I worked on Mets and Yankee baseball games, and worked with Mickey Mantle and other famous people, and you start to get that message. It's kind of hackney now that you realize there's a lot of money and power, but there's also a lot of, not necessarily a lot of happiness running around. And somewhere along the line, just that idea of saying, is that all there is, the old Peggy Lee song, and kind of thinking, gee, something's kind of missing, and something whispered in my head, maybe it's God. And it was kind of like, oh, that's interesting. You know, I never not thought about God, but I probably had gotten to the George Lucas kind of focus, you know, the Force. Like, of course there's something, but it's all melded together, and what is it really? And of course God loves everybody, so nobody will really get punished. But I started to sense that there was something missing, and we ended up going on a marriage encounter weekend, and that was when I stopped and realized, oh, you know, God is really missing, and what's really important in my life. And I realized what's important in my life is my wife. We didn't have any, well, we did have one child at the time, my wife and my child, and I had a child who had some learning disabilities, and so with that, I just realized, it just came to close that, you know, God is you have to put God at the center of your relationship, and it's you and your wife and your family, and everything comes out from there, and these other things are not nearly as important as we make them out to be. And so that was the beginning of kind of, like, I always talk about putting on a pair of glasses and suddenly seeing, like, the world totally different, and saying, what have I been thinking for the last 10 years? And then it was a question of, I went on Curcio, and that helped me to realize that, you know, that I had shut God out, that God was always there looking for me, trying to enlighten me, but that I had closed the curtains. And then all I had to do was open the curtains up, and he was there. And once the light was on, everything became so much clearer. And then I was lucky enough to start watching EWTN on television, and The rest is history.
And there you are. Well, it's interesting that I talk often on this program about clergy who, when they discover the Catholic Church, have to give up their vocation. Well, in a sense, you eventually did too. I mean, you had to make that change out of a very lucrative, very successful thing. And I'm wondering, a couple questions with that, because I'd like you to talk a bit about your call here. I mentioned there's a wonderful verse in the Old Testament book of Habakkuk that I'm sure Mother Angelica has probably used a bazillion times on the program, I'm sure, in which the prophecy is that for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. And it's exciting to be involved with EWTN because we know we're at least a part of the big effort that is enabling us to reach this Old Testament prophecy in a way that was never, ever possible in the history of the world because of the media and the short wave and the television. That's exciting. And I'm wondering, because of your own struggle of faith, you know, the blasé direction that brought back, did all of that kind of come together, and even this call to the possibility of reaching the world, did all that kind of feed your call that pulled you out of that very lucrative area into the goals you see here?
I think the thing that got me ultimately was, and I forget the expression, but it's the idea of saying, if I believe what I say I believe, and the most important thing is my faith and my eternal destiny, so to speak, my soul, then I should be working on something that benefits myself, my family, and other people. And I remember being at a meeting and saying, in San Francisco at a very nice hotel, after we talked about this particular sports service I was working in, and I said to myself, I don't care if it's number one. You know, that's great, but what does it do for anybody? And I just started to feel that, you know, I had done Marriage Encounter, I had seen positive, impacting people's lives with your story. And so that had kind of made me feel like, well, you know, this is important. This is actually affecting people's lives, their marriages, how they view their faith, their relationship with their children. That's a heck of a lot more important than this particular old movie or that particular, you know, baseball game, as much as fun as that might be. And so it really was, I wish I could say it was a grand vision. It really wasn't. It was really more like saying, I made the classic thing of saying to the Lord, Lord, what do you want me to do? Let me know what you want me to do, and I'll do it. I'll try and do it anyway. And he let me know.
Now, when I came into the church, I naively envisioned that I'd enter through this gate and find this great monolithic, unified body, all lovey-dovey. I came in through the gate, leaving the whole Protestant confusion behind me, and came into the Catholic Church and encountered the post-conciliar years in which there's so much confusion, bickering within the church. And I mean, there's a countless number of adjectives you have to add to the word Catholic to define what are you, okay? And the point of asking that is, now here you are in charge of programming and production for EWTN, the premier Catholic, international Catholic network, right? Mm-hmm. How do you choose programming and production to address this huge family of Catholics?
Well, I think the first thing we do, we're gifted because we have Mother Angelica's vision and Mother's outline. And as Mother saw the network, the goal was to re-catechize Catholics into their faith, of what the beauty of the church that was always there, the teachings of the church that have always been there, the rosary, the devotionals, the beauty of the Mass. All of those things were always there, but have been somewhat obfuscated, obscured by fashion, okay? And sometimes, and they say with councils, it's almost, it happened after Trent or whatever, that there's this period of experiment that you have to kind of get through, and the church has to get through that period. And I think that's with the new evangelization, and where hopefully what we're coming into now is we're starting to get past those kinds of things. And I think what makes it easy is because we keep that vision. And so whenever we're looking for things, we're not looking to have programs that are the most entertaining possibly we could make, okay? We'd like them to be interesting, but we're not going to sacrifice content, okay, for appearance. The first thing has got to be the content, okay? This has got to be the teachings of the church presented in a clear fashion that the average Catholic can understand. for all of us. For me, in many cases, I look at the programs and I try and think, what would I have wanted to learn? What would I wanted to know about? Some of it I might know now, but I didn't before. Or even other things that I just know out there. People don't quite understand how this all fits together. And we need to have this kind of catechesis that's presented along with the beauty and the truth. The truth attracts. If we tell people the truth of the church, people will watch it. Why else would somebody sit up, myself at 3 o'clock in the morning, watching George Rutler stand by a pillar talking about the Catholic Church? I worked in television for years. It wasn't the most interesting program anybody could create on television, but it doesn't matter because it's the truth. Yeah. And so as long as we keep focused on that, and yes, we know there's other people who aren't Catholic who are watching, and I think what we try and you do a fabulous job, you really do, a wonderful job of presenting this in a loving way, which is what we want it to be too. We're not going to not teach the truth of the church. There are differences. There are distinctions. Everything isn't all the same, and we're not going to back away from that. But we certainly want people to at least understand what the church really believes. It's like Fulton Sheen said, you know, the whole line about, you know, if people, 90% of the people don't believe the Catholic Church is because they believe things that the Catholic Church doesn't believe. Yeah. And if they knew what the church taught, they wouldn't have a problem with it. And so at least we know if there are good Catholics out there, I think, like myself growing up, who didn't get the catechesis they needed, you know, don't understand the underpinnings of what the church teaches, that when they start to, it crystallizes. The great thing about the church is it all fits together.
You know, you've got in front of you, you brought some listings of programs, for example. Maybe talk a bit about, you know, we have a mixed audience. We have Catholics, we've got non-Catholics. Mention a program that you see there and talk about, well, why this program, for example? You know, why we've chosen this example, what we're trying to accomplish.
Sure.
Either one we're doing now or one that you project.
Right. Well, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, obviously, we want to make sure for our people that their, you know, feast days, major events, Rome, things with the Holy Father, major beatifications like Mother Teresa, etc. We cover those to present that to our audience so that they get the context and the universality of the church. That's important. On other programs, there are some continuing series where we have people who are as hosts themselves, like Father Benedict Groeschel, Father Andrew Apostoli, Scott Hahn, where we'll have continuing series because that are not so much topic-driven than they are driven by that particular host and personality who people are attracted to their teaching style. Okay, so we have a certain amount of continuing.
Father Dubé.
Right, Father Dubé might be another example.
People interested in spirituality would typically turn to
It might be a general
Dubé.
context, but they like that person. Other ones can be more specific. One I'm looking at, Pat Madrid. We did a series based on search and rescue. It's his book. It's the whole idea of you've got people who've left the church from your family.
So far.
Is it really? You think
I think so.
Okay.
It's the best book. Yeah,
but the idea of here's something that we know that everybody watching out there, because everybody who goes to Mass, if they ever ask that question, everybody who has a member of their family who left the church, raise your hand. Everybody raises their hand, either a friend or a relative. And this is really something that's supposed to help people understand how they can relate to people, relatives, family, friends who've left the church and how they can come back. So there's a point that we felt like there was a need for that, for our audience out there. That might be one example. We did a show with Father Andrew Apostoli, shot on location in Fatima. We know that there's a high level of interest. Obviously, there's a great love for the Blessed Mother here, for our audience, Our Lady of Fatima. You know, that is important to our audience. We have another program with Father Spitzer, who did a recent series on pro-life. This is on Catholic leadership at the competitive edge, talking about Catholic ethics in business, because we know there's a lot of people, I know myself out there, when I think of the corners that I cut, and even at times when I tried not to and was convinced inside the organization that it was really okay, there's a lot of pressure out there to round the edges and to cut the corners. So those are just a couple of programs that I think, you know.
And then our new, with the open line radio, I mean, that's a new, because you might let the audience realize that one of the, that involved bringing a studio here and, you know, a lot of changes.
Right. Well, I think on the radio side, you know, obviously radio has expanded. Mother really was the one who made the clarion call about 5 or 6 years ago to say there should be Catholic radio and ask people to go out there and start radio stations. EWTN has had a shortwave network for, I guess, for over 10 years. And just to mention it, today we got an email from a gentleman who works in Antarctica at a science station who was receiving our signal and wanted to let us know that he's getting us loud and clear in Antarctica. So I'm not sure if that may be the first time we've gotten any response from Antarctica. But
was that today's show or a couple of days ago? Finally getting there.
It might have been a couple of days ago. But he did say the next time he would have a ship would be coming by in December of 2003. So I mean, you know, that kind of thing. So we had the shortwave, but we wanted to produce an AM/FM type service. There's a wonderful number of, not always so great, but wonderful number of, I think 1,500 Christian radio stations. And a few years ago there were like 5 Catholic radio stations. Now there's about 60. And so it was another way to reach out. Mother always was looking for, you know, we did it on television, we did it on the internet, we developed home video for that way to get things out, radio and shortwave, and now AM/FM to get the truth out in any way we possibly could. And so on the radio side, we've really been putting some effort in the last couple of years to improve our radio signal, make it that much more professional, offer a wide variety of programs. Certainly Catholic Answer, a very popular program. We have a good relationship with Carl Keating and Jerry Usher and all of those guys. Jeanette Bankovic does a radio show, Steve Wood's radio show. We might be doing something, a youth-oriented show with Steve Wood's daughter coming up maybe in December, in January. And recently we decided to launch our own open line where we thought we could have people like yourself, Father Mitch, Colin Donovan, who's in charge of our theology department. It always struck me that one of the things people want is answers to their questions. They have a lot of questions. They're living their lives out. They see things happen in their parish. They know what their friend says, what their brother told them, what sister told them, or whatever. And there's a lot of confusion, as you said. And we have this as a program that allows people each day for an hour to call in on general topics, yourself talking about the church and converts to some degree, but other topics. Barbara McGuigan, pro-life issues, family issues. Wednesday, Father Mitch, who can talk about Scripture and the church and the Holy Father. Thursday, John Martinoni, who's particularly adept at dealing with Catholic apologetics related to the Bible. And then Friday, Colin Donovan could answer questions about what does the church actually teach about a whole series of issues.
Well, along with all these programs which you've mentioned, others do, in the midst of that is also a program called Bookmark, which you've been doing for how many years? I mean,
5 years.
5 years, 250 plus episodes?
Something like that, right.
It's a mess of books to read.
Right, it is.
What have you...
You see my office.
I do, and I try and steal a few of those books, too. They're nice books. But not just as it gives us a book review of 250 books, but in the process of that, I mean, you've discovered kind of the growth of Catholic publishing and the beauty of that.
Well, the thing I always like to make clear is I'm not a book reviewer. You know, I don't hold myself up as a book reviewer. The way we look at Bookmark has been the idea. I always here are these wonderful guests coming through, appearing on some of our live shows. They might talk topically about something that they wrote in a book, but they never get to talk about the book per se as an author. And I always thought that might be something of interest because I know myself, book notes, and even book TV that C-SPAN has become popular, and we saw that as an indication there would be some interest. And as we started to put it out there, we also saw it as an opportunity to showcase Catholic authors, good Catholic books, which people want to see. Because how else do you know about them? There's very few places for you to be able to see them. And so by doing this, we kind of build it, and they will come. And people started, you know, we got the publishers would send us the books, and we've been able to, I think, showcase and provide by our connection, by offering it directly through a religious catalog. Obviously, people can buy it from their local bookstores, on Amazon.com, or whatever they'd like to. But it's a good way for Catholic authors to get out and do a little teaching, and at the same time offer opportunities to become aware of books that people in their privacy of their home can read and learn from.
I've always liked the book review programs for a number of reasons. That when I read a book, it's important to me to know a little bit about the author, to know where that book's coming from. And I think you provide a good service then, because in your interaction with that author, we get to know a bit about him or her, their character, why they went to write this book, because it takes a lot of effort to write a book.
Right, and I think
very important.
And I think for that, you get a sense of whether that's the style or approach that's going to appeal to you. You know, you might hear it and say, well, that's great, that's just what I'm looking for. Or you might see it and realize, well, maybe that's not quite the right book for me. But I think what's good about that, and one of the things we have tried to do on EWTN, I think with the book show, even with our backstage show that we've done music for more youth-oriented, was really designed to try to create a showcase for young Catholics who were doing some sort of music ministry kind of thing, where there was really no place for them to go, because the circuit that's out there is a generic Christian one. It's not a Catholic one. And many times they would have to perform in environments where they would basically have to downplay their Catholicism. So again, it's an opportunity at least for people to see. Some people like all of them, some won't like them all, but at least there's an opportunity for these people to be seen.
Now, with all you just heard, let me read that verse again to you. For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. I mean, look at all the things that are being involved. You know, books, radio, television, internet. I mean, it's exciting to be involved with this, and you're the point man right here for all the production. So, I mean, it's exciting ministry to be involved with that, and it's exciting when we think about, I don't know what the estimate potential audience is when we're on something like this right now.
Well, I think if you include the shortwave, you can get up about 1 billion, but a big part of that is shortwave. But we have, at least worldwide, television-wise, you're talking about 80 million plus. Yeah. You know,
that's
just
exciting.
From television on its own.
That's exciting to do it in the name of the Lord. And as you said earlier, I'm certainly glad we're doing it for the Catholic Church.
Right.
I mean, we're committed with spreading the fullness at a time after the conference, after the council, not because of the council, but because of the usual two-stream type things coming together after the time of confusion, and people trying to find that solid ground for their faith. And what a great opportunity we had to be a part of that.
Well, what's great about it is, in some ways, we're living out exactly what the council wanted, which is here we are as lay people, okay, trying to impact the culture and in society. And that's what the true call of the laity is. And part of our thing, too, because sometimes people say, you know, you're preaching to the choir. And my answer is the choir needs to be catechized, too. Have you talked to the choir in a while?
Well, that's what new evangelization means. That's what John Paul meant by new evangelization, is going to places that were Christian, but for whatever reason aren't as Christian as they were. They need to be re-evangelized. That's what it's all about.
Exactly. And we see that as being, and the way I look at it, too, because sometimes people say, you do that, I say, but, you know, if we can get to that person who is open, where the Lord has already spoken to them, and they realize there's something wrong, and they want better for their kids, you know, and they're rediscovering their faith, that person, they don't take their faith and hide it in their house. They then take that faith and they impact their brothers, their sisters, their mother, their father, their friends, their relatives. When they go to work, they live that out. And they then take what is given through the network and evangelize.
One tells one tells one tells one.
Right.
And the excitement of that. Or 2 tells 4 tells 8 tells, 16.
You're better at math than I am.
I needed my slide real quick. I'm going to go to 32, but we're going to take a break. So we'll be back in just a bit with your questions for Doug Keck, Vice President of Programming Production here at EWTN. See you in a bit. Welcome back. Our guest this evening is Doug Keck, the Vice President of Programming and Production here at EWTN. We've got a phone call and an email waiting. One last question before we jump into those, and that was, I think it's an important one to ask. You talked about the different programming, the different audiences we're trying to meet. How does EWTN determine how well we're doing? Because we don't do the ratings to make sure that the people like what we're doing.
Right. Well, obviously, I think there's twofold. We get a lot of mail. Obviously, if we didn't get a lot of mail, we couldn't stay on the air because people have to send in their checks to support what's going on. And obviously, they let us know their interest level in different things. So certainly we do that. One of the reasons we don't do any kind of scientific surveys is Mother's belief with that, and she said this many times to us, is when you start trying to do that, you might start skewing what you're doing to what people like and what's popular. And that may or may not be what God wants the message to be, okay? And so, you know, if you can start doing some programs that people like, but if, you know, these are fun and interesting, but if they're off the main topic. So the thought process was, we should be led by what we can sense from the letters that come in, from we ourselves know is missing. And also another part of that is many times our programs are built around the talent. You know, one of Mother's great idea for this series was because you were on her live show. And she was inspired because you were there, you could do the show. This would be great. Many of our series are because priests, lay people, professors show up, we become aware of them, somebody says, you know, I heard this person speak, I took a course, one of the priests had them in seminary. We have them come, they do a live show, we find that they communicate well, they're interesting, and they're like, I could do this topic, and we say, well, that would be great. And so many ways our programming is kind of led in other areas where it becomes a function of someone who comes in and has the ability to do something on this topic, and we say that would be wonderful. So in that way, it's somewhat providential. And
we are communicating to the audience that your thoughts on how we're doing is very important.
Right.
You know, there's a part of the EWTN,
Sure.
viewer services, that takes your letters and phone calls and helps bring them together so we can make sure that we're on the right track.
I will tell you, I say every email that has anything to do with radio or television, and I get basically every letter that at least has a comment that relates to it.
All right. Let's take our first caller, Marie from Florida. Hello, what's your question for us tonight?
Good evening.
Hello.
I have a quick comment and a question. Through EWTN, my love and appreciation for the Catholic Church has grown tremendously. My question, in areas where EWTN is not now being broadcast, what steps can Catholics take to help bring this about? Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you for your...
Well, thank you. That's a great question. A lot of people will ask. I guess there's two things. One is obviously if you're in the United States, we are on the Dish Network full-time, so and certainly the ability to get a satellite direct broadcast service to your house. Excuse me?
Direct also? Direct?
Yeah, we are, but
Yeah,
we're on Dish and now Direct TV. So technically, if you have the Dish Network, you obviously can get us. They offer lots of packages these days, which virtually cost you nothing to get. So that's one possibility. Now Direct TV has recently, within the last year, added our service, though I think you need the second tier service to get us, but at least if you have Direct or you're interested in that, that's another option.
That's
so
great.
So that is a way that obviously allows us to get by if there's a, you know, for some reason a channel capacity problem on a local cable system. And that's usually what you're dealing with, is a cable system who says, well, I only have so many channels, I'm not sure I want to carry yours. And a lot of cable systems and other people are looking to maximize the dollar cost per channel. And obviously the great thing about us is we're free. We're free to everybody. We give the service away. We never charge a fee. But we also are not paying people to carry us. So on the cable side, the best thing you can do is remain charitable, I think, as we've said with everything, which is communicate the interest, let people know that there are good Catholics out there that find this programming important to them, that they're good citizens in that area. And at the same time, though, I think it's important not to get too carried away because sometimes you can get people upset, and they can even decide to make negative business decisions because they're just unhappy. Now, the upside on one level is there's been a lot of consolidation in the cable industry over the last couple of years. And what's good about that on one level is if the major MSOs, multiple system operators at the corporate level, make a decision to carry you, it basically trickles down through the organizations. And recently we've signed a lot of agreements with the major players, and where we might have had a situation before in a particular market or location where, let's say, the general manager, let's say, doesn't like our channel or doesn't think it's interesting, but if he's running a cable system that's owned by a large MSO, they're going to show up one day and say, I'm sorry, this is our new channel lineup, and EWTN's one of them. And so, and we've found that I think you'll find in Canada and other places that we've gotten into New York City and English and Spanish recently, places we never got to before. And I have to say that the only thing we can credit to it is Mother and the sisters praying, and Mother's unfortunate suffering in some cases these days that are obviously bearing incredible fruit. Yeah,
she's still very much involved with the work of this network.
You bet.
Prayer. I mean, this is her. That's her charism.
If the sisters weren't praying, we wouldn't be here.
You had mentioned a little earlier the email we got from Antarctica. Well, here's an email. This just again demonstrates this the effort under the guidance of the Spirit to spread the gospel around the world as the water covers the sea. This comes from Michael E. Daniel. Dear Marcus, I have been listening to The Journey Home almost every Saturday night, Melbourne time, for over 2 years on my shortwave. It is my favorite program on any form of media. I know Australia is at the end of the earth, but have you considered interviewing some Australian converts? We have a number of distinguished converts, including some priests and a bishop. Thank you, Michael, for your email. Well, Doug, we went to England.
Right, a whirlwind tour of England, right.
That's right. You and I were there. We did bookmarks and Journey Home programs.
Right.
And the score of about 4 days. We were all over the place.
Right. We did about 8 Journey Homes and about 10 or 12 bookmarks,
That's right.
and actually a couple of little mini documentaries at the same time.
That's right. That's right.
But you know, it's interesting. You know, one of the things I would say for Australia, and of course we are a worldwide network, and we do have the channel can be seen in different parts of the world, different versions of the channel. Because some people may not be aware that we have a complete Spanish network that's available in South America and in Spain. Also is now being distributed even in the United States, and that's helpful. But Raymond D'Souza, who is an Australian, I think he's originally from South Africa, but he actually lives in Australia and is a Catholic apologist. He is slated to do a series for us, actually be taped sometime next year. Great. So we are reaching out and looking for talent and for people, and certainly somewhere along the line, if we can make the economic sense, because obviously we have to be good stewards of our people's money, to make it worthwhile, where we can do something where we can maximize that and create a number of programs internationally. We're certainly looking to do that. We produce programs now, obviously in English, in Spanish, in German, and some in French. So.
And we did the English program partially because I was already going over there to speak in a conference. Again, the finances came together. It made sense. Let's do it. What's going to happen, just to let you know, that I think either next week or the week after will be the last of our English tapes. And so what we'll be doing on that third Monday of each month for that episode, for a while, we'll be doing Canadian converts that were flying down from Canada. We had thought about going up and doing some, but again, the economics. So we'll do that. We were looking at other countries for the future. We won't name any right now, but again, it's the issue of the economics, and if it all comes together. We'd like to be able to feature converts, people on the journey in those areas where we're now broadcasting, so it isn't just an American phenomenon.
Right, so it relates to those people as well. And also, for our own audience here in the United States, is to continue to emphasize the universality of the Catholic Church, that the Catholic Church is 1 billion people worldwide.
All right. Take another email. This comes from Ann Kenny. She writes, how can I access the Journey Home show on my computer? I am no longer able to get it on my TV and will miss it terribly. Thank you for this wonderful show. My faith has been strengthened by it, and I have been able to answer others' questions because of it. God bless you, and God bless you, Ann, for your email and listening to us. The computer issue. You want to talk about that?
Well, I am not the expert on the internet, and it is not something that I oversee, so my knowledge is not as great or succinct. But I do believe that we have streaming video, so I believe there's no reason that you can't technically watch the show while it's on.
Go to EWTN.com.
Right.
And when you get the catalog of options, you'll find television. Go to the Journey Home, and you have the choice. I think you can listen to archived Journey Home programs. The audio is all there. You can look through all the old archives. Plus, you can go to radio, go to the radio, and then you can click in and listen. It depends on your, the bandwidth of your own access where you are.
Yeah, exactly. What kind of modem you have, what kind of hookup you have, what kind of pipe into your house.
But shortwave is that other option. I mean, you can get shortwave here in the States. That's the other option that we strongly. In fact, EWTN used to sell a little shortwave radio. I don't know if they still did that anymore.
Yeah, they do. We do.
Is that right?
We do. Yeah. But again, now that we're available in some markets because of AM, FM, and also now that we're available on Editions and DirecTV, in many cases people who would have relied on getting a shortwave radio can get the television network, even though the television network and the radio network are not exactly the same, obviously. We are differentiating them.
Well, some of the programs.
Right, they're similar, but they're not a simulcast. It's not like when you get the radio, it's the audio from TV running at the same time.
Some of it is. Like this program right now is live on.
Right, there's a couple of programs that are like that. But the vast majority, even of the series stuff, when it airs, it would air at different times, and there are programs that are uniquely designed for radio, just as there are programs uniquely designed for television.
All right. All right, I think we have an email waiting for us here. M. Pasquale in Enfield. He writes, Marcus and Doug, I love EWTN and pray for the day when Mother Angelica will be back on live television.
Don't we all?
Can't wait. Right. For years, she has gently cajoled us, gently, as a mother would, to strive for holiness and pray more. But what is it like behind the scenes?
Right.
She was pretty tough with us sometimes. Did she have even higher expectations for her employees? I know that she would pray and also consult with Sister Raphael before big decisions. Do the people running EWTN pray together too? Does everyone have to go to Mass and say the Rosary every day? All these questions, they want to know the ins and outs.
Okay. Well, let's start with, let me start with the first one that talked about Mother Angelica. I think it was always fair to say the Mother Angelica you saw is what you got.
Yeah.
And so the loving spiritual aspects of Mother's personality, her insight into people, her caring, her sympathy, her empathy for people struggling, was all there in person.
Yeah.
Likewise, the Italian temper, that part of her, you know, she was on a mission for the Lord. She was on an important thing that had to get done, and we had to work with that. And you know, it was a wonderful experience. It has been a wonderful experience. But yeah, she is the way she seems on TV. The parts, she's funny, she's witty, she cracks jokes, she's self-deprecating, all of those things you talk about. She's understanding, but she also, you know, she tunes into what she thinks we're supposed to do. Incredible intuitiveness and the ability of sensing when we're going in the right direction, when we weren't going in the right direction. Amazing ability on television. I mean, you could say to Mother Angelica, Mother, can you talk about the Holy Spirit for 5 minutes? Okay, and she'd talk, and at 5 minutes she'd be finished. I've never seen anything like it in my life. Unique. Privilege. Obviously, everybody knows who watches, she's unique and gifted. And I think anybody who watches the Mother Angelica Live Classics, now I myself realize to some degree, you know, the loss it is that she's not on right now.
Yeah.
Because her points are so salient, they're so important. Yeah. They touch us all. But so that, anyway, that would be the point I would say about Mother. She's just like you see her. Yeah. On the other things, no one, obviously we have people who are not Catholic who work here. Mother was always proud of the fact that not everybody here is Catholic, that we have people who aren't Catholic. No one, including the Catholics, are forced to go to Mass. Obviously, you're expected to go to Mass on Sunday, but there's daily Mass available in the morning, obviously the TV Mass. There's a noon Mass for all employees that are invited to. There's opportunities for daily prayer. There's opportunities once a week where the brothers will come in and do a prayer. So it's important. And Mother, and we have Eucharistic adoration where the employees, with the sisters not being here, have taken that on and do an hour a day. And that's something, again, it's a volunteer thing. But Mother always said, and to all of us, that it's very important that you pray, that you go to Mass. You need that spiritual nourishment, or you will burn out.
Well, and part of the reason for the brothers and the others here was to ensure that there would be continued spiritual direction for the employees.
And we have great priests, and we really do. Father Francis, Father Joseph, you know, Father Angelus, Father Anthony, now Father Mark.
Father Mark, that's a new exciting thing.
I had to stop myself.
That's great.
No, Brother Mark or Deacon Mark.
That's a very exciting thing. Let's take our next email. This comes from Bob Drury in Geneva, New York. Dear Marcus and Doug, seminarians take a major sequence in philosophy in order to understand theology. Doug said that everything in the faith hangs together. One important apologetic aspect is that everything in the faith hangs together with secular learning and, most importantly, philosophy. Could EWTN see the teaching of philosophy as part of its mission?
Well, you know, I would think, in a sense, yes. Obviously, we've done a couple of things. We did Philosophy 101 with Dr. Garrity. It's a short spot that we have on television where he does use philosophy to talk about
and Ralph McInerney did something on it for a while.
Yeah, Ralph McInerney. In fact, yeah, he did something on Thomas Aquinas. And there's also Dr. Rice may, in fact, be coming back to do something on that. We certainly did a program a couple of years ago having to do with the Holy Father that was a philosophical presentation. I think what we have to do, and we do try to manage it this way, is to realize that television's a good forum for some things and not always a great forum for others. You know, and we do have a diverse audience, and we're trying to offer, you know, there's Bob and Penny Lord, There's also Crisis in Culture with Dale Hudson. There's the Raymond Arroyo kind of interview. There's the Life on the Rock. There's this. And we're trying to be able to bring in new faces and new things that all fit inside the orthodox structure of the network as seen by Mother. But at the same time, we can't afford to talk too far over our audience's head. And sometimes we've done some programs where people, well-meaning teachers, are talking about things, and you just know that the average Catholic out there goes, I don't, you know, so my average guy sitting there going, I'm, you know, this is really too heavy for me or too deep. I'm not sure I can follow all of this.
I was going to say, it'd be great if we had like 4 streams.
Right.
You know, and this was the education EWTN channel, and then this was the Catholic movie.
Right.
You know,
and here's the youth channel.
The youth
whatever,
channel,
right.
you know. But
and we certainly hope that someday, through technology and through the advancement and support of the network, that those opportunities can be that much more, whether it's video on demand, kind of things where people can access the programs they want to see on their own, which, you know, is obviously
you never know what's
there.
going to be in 5 years. It's amazing.
Right, exactly, and that's really hitting right now. So I would just say to that is that we look at those things, we try to do those things. We have a cooperation situation with Catholic Distance University. We just recently shot a program having to do with Father Tarraco, which will be on next year, having to do with the gospel life in healthcare, where it's basically a college-level type course where you can get credits through Catholic Distance University. So we are trying to offer those kinds of things, but we also have to be careful that we don't put something on that's too up there that one of our viewers say, you know, I'm not following what Father's saying. You know,
that's right.
So.
Okay. All right, let's go with, here's one from a little closer to your part of the world, New Rochelle, New York.
Okay.
Getting close there. It's from Jerry. He says, Mark, the other day when Dr. Ray Grundy and the two of you mentioned your rather wild college days, well, he mentioned his, and he implied I had wild days, but he was dumping them on me. My stories probably win hands down, Jerry's admitting, but that's not something I'm not particularly proud, especially now that my son is almost 17 years old. Luckily, I guess, he and all of his friends hate my music, the Doors and the band and that whole scene. But how do I not leave him with the wrong impression that it's okay to sow wild oats, so to speak, because there is always an option to, quote, revert or come back to the church later. I'd like for my son to never stray off the path like I did. That's a good question, because when we have the journeys every week, after a while, you know, some of us have the wild period or just go off, and we certainly don't want to give the impression that we're saying this is the way it ought to be. I couldn't agree with Jerry, but your thoughts on that one?
Well, you'd be better at answering this, but
I'm the host, you're the guest.
But I'll give you the biggest thing I think that we have to be careful about in today's society is succumbing to the charge of hypocrisy, okay? There is nothing wrong with learning by your own mistakes and passing that information on. In every other thing in life, people learn by mistakes and then pass on that information to the people behind them. Why? So those people don't make those same mistakes. But somehow in our personal life, the charge is that because you did some things wrong and realized later that you're being a hypocrite now by saying that somebody else can't experience the same thing. Well, that's crazy. And I think we just have to avoid that situation and realize that I think what our goal is through EWTN, if you can inculcate the faith and truth and the virtues at a younger age, then that child will have a better opportunity to deal with those tough questions, because the reality is we're not going to be able to hide them under a rock out of society. One way or the other, they're going to have to deal with it, because somewhere along the line they're going to be getting married to or dealing with people or working with people who grow up in the middle of this sex-saturated, you know, crazy culture that's out there. And they need to be able to deal with that, but they need to be inculcated early on and protected until they can deal with that in an appropriate fashion. And you have every right, regardless of what you did in your prior life, to pass on what you know is right. Why would you pass on falsehood when you know what the truth is now?
Yeah, it really comes down to how we present our past. You know, if we're blustery about it and, you know, and kind of braggadocious about it, well, then we're not communicating what it is. Right. It's not something we're proud of, but it's part of the journey that God allowed us to go through. It's kind of like the hardening of the heart of Pharaoh. Well, he had a part to do. It wasn't just God doing it to him. He hardened his own heart, and God let that happen. Well, in our own journeys, sometimes that's what God knows is best for us. And when I look at our programming here at EWTN, when we're doing a program like tonight, we have no idea in reality where the audience heart is,
Right.
or who might be watching. But what excites me is, I've been doing the program now, this is in the 7th year, I can tell you right now that even the episode that at the time I might wonder that may not have been our strongest episode.
Right, you're surprised. The
Every
opposite's true. Right,
time.
right.
We'll get an email from somebody, a
Right.
different person that say, you know, that was the best show
Right.
you've done so far.
Right, the one you think, oh, what a dog.
Yeah.
That was so boring. And then people pour in and say, that touched my heart.
Because you just never know. And it's the same thing with anyone who's on the journey. It could be a teenager or youth that might turn on EWTN. Our
Right.
prayer is that something we're saying in that program.
The other
will be
thing
the
that
touch
struck
us.
me too, and just in talking about as a parent, humility. You have to be able to say to your kids, I've made mistakes in my life. You know, I'm not perfect. I wasn't perfect. Okay? And I can be humble and admit that. But I also have to be loving and tell you that because I did those things, there's not a reason for you to do it.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, again, I want to make sure that the audience doesn't misunderstand the way that I do the Journey Home every week. We're certainly not trying to every week force somebody's story into a prodigal son story.
Right,
I mean, we don't try to do that. But really the goal of each Journey Home program is, the most exciting part of the Journey Home program is that section where I say, okay, what opened your heart? I love to see how the Holy Spirit touches somebody where they were. Mm-hmm. You know, for you it was that God used marriage encounter, or maybe even just
my son.
And your son.
Right.
And often the things that we go through are not something we'd wish on somebody else, but it was the very thing that the Lord used in our life, and we see the blessing in that, and thank God for it. You know, I mean, that's part of the
That's
joy.
why you have that preformed cross that fits you perfectly.
The yoke,
Right,
you know,
right.
the yoke of Jesus, which is a gentle one. You've been with EWTN how long?
7 years.
7 years.
7 years.
7 years. I'm just maybe in closing, a closing thought for the folk. You know, a word of encouragement from all that you've experienced here and with the programming and your own journey in faith. Word of encouragement to the folk at home and strengthen their faith.
Well, all I can say about that is, what you see on EWTN is what it is. It's like Mother Angelica. There's an authenticity there. This is not for show. The sisters aren't for show. It's all real. And when people come here, they see that and they sense that. And I think if there's anything we can convey, it's that. Yeah. It's that it's authentic and it's true. As one person said one time, it's all true. The church is true, and what you see here is not staged to convince you of that. It's lived out to show you how it really is.
And someone add to that, which struck me because of where I came from. I'm not going to point fingers at another Christian network, but there's at least one other Christian network that when you watch it, there's no continuity from one show to the next. It depends on who buys that hour. Mm-hmm. And then you might have this preacher or this prophetess or this healer and saying contradictory things from one to the next.
That's right.
And the beauty that, again, that I see from my own journey in this network is the unity that's here in the faith between every single person that's on, not just the regulars, but someone we bring in for a special, someone we bring in from Colombia that does a Hispanic program to proclaim the faith. It's so exciting that here comes someone from a completely different culture, and you sit down at the dinner table, and it's the same faith.
Right, right.
I mean, that's the beauty of EWTN in my mind, because it brings this one church together.
And again, because there is the unity of the church, so it's if we present what the church actually teaches, it's naturally going to be unified. And of course, with Mother Angelica as our guiding light for those things, it's easy too, because many times we will sit there and say, what would Mother do? How would Mother view this? Does this fit into our vision of the catechesis? That's what our function is.
I know someone wants to ask quickly, any special prayers we ought to ask for Mother?
Well, I would just say that, that Mother, loves the people who watch the network, and she would just ask all of them to continue to pray for her and the sisters, that she be able to do what God wants her to do with the time she has left.
All right. Doug, thank you for joining
it's a
us
pleasure.
on the journey home.
You do a fantastic
job.
Well,
thank you, and Mother gave me the opportunity to do this show, but also in the 6 years, you're the one that's also allowed it to keep happening, keep guiding the program, and make sure I don't go off on the...
Well, you're too good. How could I get mad at you?
Thanks a lot. Thank you to be on the program. And thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed tonight's program, hearing more about the ins and outs of EWTN. Thank you for your prayers and your support of our work, because we're one family committed to this together. And so our prayers are also with you as you seek to follow your faith in Jesus Christ. God bless. I'll see you again next week.